The evening air buzzed with artificial laughter and the clinking of expensive glasses as I pushed open the grand glass doors of the Ivy room. My boots, worn thin from long shifts and double overtime, tapped against the marble floors like they didn't belong. And maybe I didn't. Not in a place filled with glittering name tags, patent leather smiles, and people who shook hands for sport. But I was here for my brother. Or at least I thought I was. I caught sight of him instantly. Derek. My older brother. Dressed in a navy designer suit he once said cost more than my monthly rent. His arm was around some executive's shoulder, flashing that polished smile of his. I raised my hand with a small wave, half hoping he wouldn't notice me. But he did. He stared at me for a second. His eyes traveled from my faded jeans to the work polo I'd pressed 3 times just to make it look halfway decent. Then he smirked. "Oh look," he said loud enough for the group to hear. "The janitor's here." A few heads turned. Some awkward laughs followed. My heart thudded. I stood frozen for a second, blinking through it like it hadn't just slapped me. He stepped toward me, lowering his voice just enough to make it feel personal. "Seriously, Sam? This is a corporate celebration. You clean toilets for a living. You really had to show up and embarrass me?" I opened my mouth to reply, but I couldn't find my voice. Then came the final cut. "Just stay out of the photos, yeah?" he added, then turned his back. I stood there in that glitzy room filled with people in tailored clothes and champagne dreams, suddenly aware of every flaw in my outfit, every callus on my hands, and every drop of sweat that had ever clung to my brow. I'd come straight from work, because he'd asked me to come. I'd told my supervisor I had a family event, and she'd smiled and told me to go. "You deserve a good night." But this wasn't that night. Still, I didn't leave. Something deep inside told me not to. Instead, I walked to the back of the room, past people who barely noticed, and grabbed a glass of water. I stood by the window and looked out at the skyline. Somewhere beneath those city lights were the buildings I scrubbed clean, the stairwells I mopped, the office trash bins I emptied every night. I hadn't told anyone what I'd done a week ago. Not even Derek. But the secret itched under my skin like a hidden tattoo. Minutes passed. The CEO was due any second. Derek kept checking his watch, whispering to his colleagues, probably anticipating a promotion announcement. I knew how hard he had worked. I knew how obsessed he had become with climbing the corporate ladder, at any cost. I also knew something he didn't. And just then, the ballroom doors opened again. The room fell into a respectful hush. Mr. Fletcher, the CEO, walked in. A tall man in his 60s with a calm presence that seemed to command attention without demanding it. He didn't head straight for the stage.
No.
He scanned the crowd, and his eyes landed on me. A slight, knowing smile tugged at his lips. He walked straight toward where I stood, my cheap flats scuffing the marble, my hands trembling slightly around the glass. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mr. Fletcher said, projecting his voice. "Before we begin tonight's celebration, I want to introduce someone important." Derek's expression shifted. A smug smile. He adjusted his blazer. But Mr. Fletcher kept walking, until he reached me. "Please give a warm welcome," he said, "to our company's new majority owner, Miss Samantha Grayson." Gasps broke out like fireworks. Derek spun around so fast he nearly knocked over a champagne flute. His face drained of color. His jaw slackened. I smiled, just a little. He stumbled forward. What are you talking about?" he stammered. Mr. Fletcher turned to him calmly. "The board approved it unanimously. The buyout was discreet, but finalized last week. Your sister is now the largest shareholder of Grayson and Klein Tech." I stood tall, not to gloat, not to embarrass, just to breathe. To finally stand in a room where I didn't have to shrink. Derek's knees buckled. He literally dropped. Someone helped him up. The rest of the room stared, some in awe, others in pure confusion. But I wasn't there for applause. I wasn't there for revenge. I was there to show that dignity doesn't need wealth to exist. And sometimes the people we write off are the ones writing the next chapter. The moment Derek dropped to his knees, the room seemed to hold its breath. Time slowed, not for drama, but because no one knew what to say next. It was one of those scenes people would whisper about later. At the water cooler, in private group chats, maybe even on anonymous forums. Did you see what happened at Derek Grayson's promotion party? I didn't move. I didn't rush in to help him. Not because I was angry, but because I knew he needed that moment. The shock. The silence. The truth landing like thunder in a sky he thought he owned. Mr. Fletcher clapped a hand gently on Derek's shoulder. You might want to stand up, son. The cameras are still rolling. Derek got up slowly, his face pale, his hands twitching like his entire nervous system had gone offline. This is a joke, right? He whispered to no one in particular. It's not, I said calmly. My voice didn't tremble this time. He looked at me like I'd stolen something that was meant to be his. And in his world I had. But he didn't know the half of it yet. I walked toward the center of the room, every eye fixed on me. The new owner, the janitor, the contradiction no one could quite reconcile. I know this is unexpected, I said into the mic the CEO offered me. I didn't come here tonight to make anyone feel small. I came because my brother invited me. Some murmurs. He didn't know, I continued, and I didn't plan to reveal anything tonight. But life doesn't always give us perfect timing. People leaned in, not just to hear but to feel. I started working for Grayson and Klein 5 years ago, I said. Not in this building. Not even in this city. I cleaned floors, scrubbed tiles, wiped down desks no one ever thanked me for. And one day, I found out the company was hemorrhaging money. I did my homework. I asked questions. I used the same grit I needed to survive life to understand a business no one thought I was smart enough to touch. A pause. Turns out, no one was watching the numbers as closely as I was. People were still as stone. I reached out to a silent investor. I bought in, small at first, then a little more, and then a little more, until last week, I had enough to walk into that boardroom and say, I'm ready. And they listened, not because of my last name, but because of my work. I looked straight at Derek. His eyes were bloodshot now, not with anger, with disbelief, maybe shame. I'm not here to take anything from anyone, I said quietly, but I'm not going to hide who I am either. I clean, I serve, I work, and now, I own. You could hear the heartbeat of the room. I stepped back. Mr. Fletcher smiled gently and took the mic again. Well, I think that speaks for itself. And just like that, the music started again, but the mood had changed. Conversations were softer, glances sharper, and people looked at me not with pity, but with something else. Respect. Maybe curiosity. Maybe both. Derek didn't come near me again that night. But someone else did. An older woman, in a silver shawl and glasses that glittered in the low light, approached me by the hors d'oeuvres table. You don't remember me, she said, but you used to clean the 11th floor. I blinked, then nodded slowly. I do remember you. You always said goodnight when I passed by. Her eyes glistened. And you always made sure my plants got water, even when no one else did. I watched you, dear. I watched the way you took care of things no one else noticed. I knew you'd go far. I smiled then, not because I was proud of the money or the title, but because someone had seen me when I didn't think anyone did. That night, as I walked home, yes, walked, still too grounded to call a cab, I thought about how many moments we live thinking no one notices. Thinking kindness goes unseen. Effort unappreciated. How easy it is to believe the world only rewards those who already have power. But sometimes it rewards those who remember how to clean up after themselves and others. And I wasn't done yet. Because this story wasn't about revenge. It was about rising. The next morning, the world felt different. Not because of the boardroom title. Not because of the whispers or the stares. But because my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Missed calls, unread messages, emails flooding in like a tidal wave. Some congratulating me. Some questioning. A few, well, they didn't hide the bitterness. But the one call I didn't expect? Derek. I stared at his name on the screen, thumb hovering. Then, finally, I picked up. Sam, he said, his voice quieter than usual. Not cocky. Not performative. Yes, I replied, letting the silence stretch. I didn't know, he started. I mean, if I had any idea, you would have treated me better? I cut in, softly but firmly. He paused. That's not fair. No, I said. What wasn't fair was you calling me an embarrassment in front of 200 people. I was under pressure. You were cruel, Derek. You've been cruel. Ever since Dad died. You climbed that ladder so fast, you forgot how to look down at the ones holding it steady. Silence. I didn't mean it, he finally whispered. I know, I said. That's what makes it worse. He sighed. Can we talk? Face to face. Part of me didn't want to, but another part, the part that remembered sneaking out snacks for him when he'd study late in college, the part that patched his shirt with duct tape during high school science fair, said yes. Come to the cafe on 6. In 30 minutes. It was raining when I got there. I sat by the window, watching droplets snake down the glass. Derek walked in 5 minutes late, soaked despite the umbrella. He looked different. The suit was gone. Just jeans and a hoodie. The kind of clothes he never wore unless he was in real trouble. He sat down slowly, not meeting my eyes. I panicked last night, he said. I thought it was a prank. Or some elaborate humiliation. It wasn't, I said simply. I know now. I mean, the CEO gave a speech, Sam. I sipped my coffee. And I guess I'm just trying to understand. When did this all happen? When you were busy pretending I didn't exist, I said, not with venom but with calm. His head dropped. I'm not here to make you feel guilty, I continued. I just want you to understand that I didn't do this to prove something. I did it because I could. And because someone had to. You own the company I work for now, he muttered. Do you know how surreal that is? I shrugged. I used to clean bathrooms you walked past without saying hi. That was surreal too. He exhaled, long and heavy. Are you going to fire me? I looked at him. No, I said. But I'm going to reassign you. His eyes flicked up. What does that mean? It means you're going to shadow someone from the ground floor. Learn what it's like for the people you forget to thank. You're demoting me? No. I'm giving you a second chance. The one you never gave me. He blinked. Once. Twice. You're serious? Very. The waitress came by to refill our drinks, and I thanked her. Derek didn't. But as she walked away, he looked down ashamed. That was the start. Later that afternoon, I walked through the company's downtown office. Not with security or PR. Just alone. I stepped into the janitor's closet. My old sanctuary. Still smelled like bleach and rubber gloves. I closed my eyes, remembering the nights I cried here. Not because I hated the job, but because I hated how invisible it made me feel. I didn't want to be invisible anymore. I walked to the 12th floor and knocked on the HR director's door. She looked up, startled. Samantha, sorry, Miss Grayson, she said quickly. No need for that. I'm still Sam. She smiled nervously. I need to make some changes, I said. Starting with wage restructuring for our sanitation staff. And I want them included in the annual company retreat. Every department. No exceptions. She nodded, mouth parting slightly in surprise. That's groundbreaking. No. It's overdue. That night I called Mom. She still lived in the same little house. Still had the same floral wallpaper. And still thought I worked night shifts at an office building. When she picked up, I said, Mom, there's something I need to tell you. And when I did, her silence wasn't disbelief. It was pride too big for words. She cried. I cried. And for the first time in years, I felt whole. Because even though the world saw me now as owner or powerhouse, or that girl who cleaned floors, my mother saw me as Samantha. Her daughter. Her fighter. Her kind one. 2 weeks passed. The company was still adjusting to the shockwave of my arrival. Some embraced it. Others watched quietly, waiting for me to slip up. That was fine. I wasn't here to win a popularity contest. I was here to rebuild a culture I once felt discarded by. And I was doing it one department at a time. The first thing I did was remove all the executive-only coffee machines. Why should better coffee be reserved for people with nicer titles? I said during the weekly staff meeting. From now on, everyone drinks the same blend. The finance team chuckled. The janitorial staff looked stunned. But it was just the beginning. I restructured shift benefits, implemented mental health check-ins, increased maternity and paternity leave, and removed the unpaid intern loophole that had become corporate's dirty little secret. I wasn't here to burn the building down. I was here to turn the lights on in every dark hallway. Derek had started his reassignment. He shadowed a man named Luis on the 5th floor, one of the cleaning leads who'd worked there for 11 years. Luis didn't treat Derek like a manager or a threat. He treated him like any new trainee, a little rough, a little honest, but fair. You ever cleaned a toilet with dried chewing gum stuck under the rim? Luis asked, holding up gloves. Derek gagged. That's what I thought, Luis smirked. 3 days in, Derek called me. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't know how hard this work was. You didn't care, I replied. Now you do. Meanwhile, something unexpected happened. People began opening up to me. A woman in IT sent me a handwritten note saying, I've been here 9 years. No one ever knew my daughter had leukemia. No one asked. But I saw how you talked to the mailroom guy. You made him feel human. Thank you. A man in logistics walked up to me in the elevator, eyes darting around. I saw you eating lunch in the break room last week, he said. I didn't think owners did that. They don't, I replied. But I'm not just an owner. What are you then? Someone who remembers what it's like to be forgotten. He smiled, nodded once, and got off at the 6th floor. One morning, I arrived early. Before the cleaning crews had finished. Before the executives even stirred in their high-rise lofts. I found Derek sitting in the lobby, rubbing his hands together, waiting for Luis. He looked exhausted, but not in a bad way. I haven't had this much dirt under my nails since Little League, he said with a half-smile. I sat beside him, sipping black coffee. You know, he continued, you didn't have to do this. You could have fired me, made an example of me. Why would I do that? Because I humiliated you. You could have gotten revenge. I shook my head. That's not why I bought the company. Then why? I looked over at the giant company logo on the wall, polished steel letters that once meant power only for the few. Because no one should feel ashamed of how they earn an honest living. He nodded, looking down at his shoes. And because I wanted to forgive you, I added, but I needed you to feel what I felt first. Not to hurt you, but to heal me. Derek's eyes watered. He didn't speak. He just reached into his backpack and pulled something out. A wrapped sandwich, with a sticky note on it. You used to pack these for me when we were kids, he said. Thought maybe I'd return the favor. I took it. He didn't say sorry again. He didn't have to. Sometimes, redemption doesn't come from words. It comes from sandwiches in silence at 6 a.m. Later that week, HR told me morale had gone up. Turnover had dropped. And a record number of employees had signed up for Community Volunteering Day. Luis? He'd been nominated for Employee of the Month. By Derek. When I asked Luis how that felt, he shrugged. He's learning. I'll give him that. And me? I was still scrubbing. Not floors anymore, but systems. Attitudes. Walls people built between job titles. And maybe most importantly, I was scrubbing off the shame I'd carried all those years. Because shame clings like grease, quiet, sticky, and hard to wash off. But every day, it faded more. And in its place, pride. Not the loud, chest-thumping kind, but the quiet kind that lets you walk into any room, no matter how grand, and know you belong. It was the company's annual leadership summit. This time, instead of hosting it at a 5-star hotel with overpriced buffets and stiff collars, I moved it to the community center downtown. The one I used to mop floors in at night while studying investor reports on my phone. Some executives grumbled at first. No valet parking. No imported champagne. But most of them, especially the new hires, the interns, the ground-level employees who were invited for the first time, came with smiles wide enough to light up the place. Derek was one of the first to arrive. He wore a plain button-up and jeans. No Rolex, no pretense. He even helped set up the folding chairs. I didn't say anything. I just watched from across the room as he passed out coffee, joked with the facility's crew, and sat next to a woman from shipping. He didn't act like the man I once knew, the one who couldn't even say the word janitor without wrinkling his nose. This version of Derek was quieter, humble, and real. That day I gave a speech, but it wasn't rehearsed. No teleprompter. Just me, standing in front of a crowd that had once felt unreachable. I want to talk about labels, I began. The ones we wear, the ones people give us, and the ones we sometimes believe are true. Eyes locked on me. No one scrolled their phones. I used to believe I was just the cleaning girl. I believed it every time someone avoided my gaze, or left their trash behind like it was my job to be invisible. I believed it until I didn't. I paused. I didn't change who I was. I just stopped apologizing for it. There was a soft murmur of agreement. And the truth is, there is nothing small about service. There is nothing embarrassing about work that supports others. And there is no one, no matter their job, who should ever feel beneath respect. A standing ovation followed, but not from Derek. He just stayed seated, eyes red, jaw tight, clapping slowly. Because I wasn't talking to the room anymore, I was talking to us. To our past. To everything that broke, and everything we were still healing. That night, after the summit ended and the hall cleared out, I walked out into the parking lot and found Derek leaning on the hood of his car. He looked up at the sky, then at me. You know, he said, I used to think success meant looking expensive. I leaned beside him. What do you think now? I think it means being someone your younger self would be proud of. A gust of wind passed between us. You know what I think, I said. What? That maybe success is when you stop needing revenge. When what you build matters more than what you were denied. He smiled. That's why you're the boss. No, I said. That's why I stopped being angry. A month later, I made my last big move. I announced the creation of a full-ride scholarship, funded entirely by a percentage of my own shares, for children of janitorial, maintenance, cafeteria, and admin staff. I named it the Grayson Grant, after my father, because despite the shame we felt growing up, he was the one who taught me that dignity doesn't need defending. It just needs remembering. Years passed. The company changed. Slowly, but deeply. Derek eventually moved on, by his own choice. Not in disgrace, but with grace. He started a nonprofit that helped people re-enter the workforce. I even donated to it anonymously every year. Luis got promoted. Twice. And me? I never bought a penthouse. I stayed in the same walk-up apartment. Same creaky floors. Same corner cafe. Because every time I thought about upgrading, I remembered the janitor's closet. That tiny space where I learned the value of work, of watching, of dreaming without needing anyone's permission. And on some days, when I walked into the office early, I'd still greet the cleaning crew by name. Because I never forgot. Not who I was. And certainly not who I still am.
The music was thumping, the bass rippling through the air like a living pulse. This wasn't just a party. It was the event of the season, where the city's most powerful gathered, flaunting their wealth like peacocks in full display. Ella, 23, kept her head down, weaving between glittering gowns and sharp suits as she balanced a tray of champagne flutes. She was used to being invisible in places like this. The rich laughed, the servers served, and the divide between them was sharper than ever. But tonight that line would shatter. Ella's grip tightened as she approached the poolside crowd. Among them was Leo, the king of arrogance, whose sneer had a way of cutting deeper than any knife. She hated working these gigs, but her mother's hospital bills and her brother's school fees didn't pay themselves. As she offered the tray, Leo's voice rang out louder than the music. Hey, everyone, who's up for a laugh? Without warning, he shoved her. Ella's tray tilted as her feet scrambled to find balance on the slick poolside tiles. Time seemed to slow, the sparkling champagne flutes glinting like falling stars before crashing to the ground. Then came the cold shock of water engulfing her body. She hit the pool with a loud splash, gasping as icy liquid filled her ears and dragged her down. Above her, the world erupted in laughter. Ella surfaced, her hair plastered to her face, her soaked uniform clinging awkwardly to her frame. The crowd gathered at the edge of the pool, their mockery cutting through the cool night air. And there was Leo standing front and center, his grin as sharp as a blade. "Relax, Cinderella," he jeered, raising his glass in mock celebration. "It's just a little water." Ella's cheeks burned, a mix of humiliation and rage flooding her veins. Every instinct screamed at her to shout back, to lash out, but instead, she bit her tongue. This wasn't the first time she'd been humiliated by someone like Leo. It wouldn't be the last. She climbed out of the pool, her soaked shoes squelching as she bent down to pick up the shattered glass. Her hands trembled, not from the cold, but from the effort it took to hold herself together. "Look at her," someone whispered behind her. "Does she even belong here?" "She should have stayed in the kitchen," another added, their cruel laughter fueling the fire burning inside Ella. She clenched her jaw and kept working, gathering the shards carefully, deliberately. Her dignity, though battered, remained intact. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. But then, as she bent to pick up the last piece of glass, the crowd fell silent. A presence cut through the chatter like a blade through silk. Ella didn't look up at first, but she could feel the shift in the air, the weight of someone important. When she finally glanced up, she saw him. Archer Malcolm, the enigmatic host of the evening, stood at the edge of the crowd. His tailored suit seemed to glimmer under the string lights, and his sharp eyes swept the scene with a cold, assessing gaze. People whispered his name like a reverent prayer, and even the most confident guests seemed to shrink under his scrutiny. "What's going on here?" Archer's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, a steel that promised consequences. Leo, caught off guard, attempted a casual laugh. "Oh, just a little fun, Archer. No big deal." Archer's gaze flicked to Ella, who was still on her knees, holding the tray of broken glass. "This," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous tone, "looks like more than just fun." Ella swallowed hard, her throat dry despite being soaked to the bone. She didn't know what to say, or if she should say anything at all. "Did you fall?" Archer asked, his attention fully on her now. She hesitated, glancing at Leo, whose expression had shifted from smug to nervous. But then she remembered her mother, her brother, and every moment she'd endured for their sake. "No," Ella said, her voice steady. "He pushed me." The silence that followed was deafening. Archer's eyes darkened as he turned back to Leo. "You pushed her." "It was a joke," Leo stammered, raising his hands defensively. "Everyone thought it was funny, right?" He glanced around for support, but the crowd had turned quiet, their earlier amusement replaced with discomfort. Archer stepped closer, his presence towering over Leo. "Humiliating someone who works hard to make a living is your idea of a joke?" Leo opened his mouth to respond, but Archer cut him off. "You're leaving. Now." Before Leo could protest, two men in black suits appeared at Archer's signal. They flanked Leo, who sputtered indignantly as they escorted him away. The crowd parted for them, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. As Leo disappeared, Archer turned back to Ella. "Are you all right?" he asked, his tone softening. Ella nodded, though her hands still shook. "I'm fine," she managed, though her voice wavered slightly. "You don't look fine," Archer said, his sharp eyes scanning her drenched figure. "Come with me." Ella hesitated. "I still have work to do." Archer raised an eyebrow. "I think you've done more than enough tonight." With that, he held out a hand. After a brief pause, Ella took it, letting him guide her away from the pool and the prying eyes of the crowd. As they stepped into the quieter halls of the mansion, Ella couldn't help but wonder. Why was he helping her? What did Archer Malcolm, a man with the world at his feet, see in someone like her? And more importantly, what did he want in return? Ella followed Archer into a private lounge tucked away from the noise of the party. The air was cooler here, quieter, as if the room itself existed in a different world from the chaos outside. Archer closed the door behind them and gestured for her to sit on a plush leather chair near the fireplace. "I don't bite," he said, his tone softer now, almost amused. Ella sat hesitantly, her soaked uniform sticking uncomfortably to her skin. She felt out of place, her wet shoes leaving faint marks on the expensive rug. Archer, however, didn't seem to notice or care. He poured a glass of amber liquid from a crystal decanter and handed it to her. She shook her head. "I don't drink. It's apple juice," he said, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Ella blinked, then accepted the glass with a quiet, "Thank you." As she sipped, Archer settled into the chair opposite her, studying her with an intensity that made her squirm. His sharp blue eyes seemed to see straight through her. "You work hard," he began, leaning forward slightly. "I can see it in the way you carry yourself. The precision, the pride, even when the world around you treats you as if you're invisible." Ella stared at him, unsure how to respond. "Tell me," he continued, his voice low and steady, "what drives you? Why do you endure this?" She hesitated. The warmth of the juice in her hands steadied her nerves, and she finally spoke. "My family," she said, her voice firm. "My mother's sick, and my brother is still in school. Someone has to keep things going, and that someone is me." Archer's expression shifted slightly, something unreadable flickering across his face. "Your resilience is remarkable. But let me ask you this. Do you think these sacrifices will lead to the life you want?" Her throat tightened. "It's not about what I want. It's about what my family needs." "And what happens when you burn out?" Archer asked, his tone sharper now. "When there's nothing left of you to give?" His words hit harder than she expected. She looked down, her grip tightening around the glass. "I don't have a choice," she said quietly. "There's always a choice," Archer replied. "Sometimes it's just hidden beneath layers of expectation and fear." Ella glanced up at him, suspicion creeping into her mind. "Why are you telling me this? Why are you even talking to me?" "Because," he said, leaning back in his chair, "you remind me of someone I used to know. A lot like you, actually. Someone who worked themselves to the bone, believing they had to carry the weight of the world alone." "What happened to them?" she asked. Archer's gaze darkened, his jaw tightening slightly. "They broke." Ella's chest tightened at the weight of his words. For a moment, the two sat in silence, the only sound the faint crackle of the fireplace. "I don't want that to happen to you," Archer said finally. "You deserve better." Ella frowned. "And what does better look like?" He stood, walking over to a small desk and pulling out a folder. Returning to her, he placed it on the table between them. "This is what better looks like." Ella hesitated before opening it. Inside were documents neatly organized, outlining a position at one of Archer's charitable foundations. The title wasn't grand, but the salary was more than she could ever dream of earning in her current job. This can't be real," she murmured, her fingers trembling as she flipped through the pages. "It's very real," Archer assured her. "I need someone with your tenacity and work ethic on my team. Someone who understands what it means to fight for something bigger than themselves." "But why me?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Because you've proven yourself tonight," he said simply. "And because I believe in rewarding those who rise above the noise." Ella's mind raced. This was everything she'd ever wanted. A chance to escape the grind, to provide for her family without sacrificing her soul. But it felt too good to be true. "What's the catch?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. Archer smirked faintly. "Smart question. There isn't one. The only condition is that you accept help when it's offered, and use it to build the life you deserve." Ella stared at him, trying to read the sincerity in his eyes. She wanted to trust him, but years of struggle had taught her to be wary of generosity, especially from someone as powerful as Archer Malcolm. "Take your time," he said, standing. "Think it over. But remember, opportunities like this don't come around often." As he turned to leave, he paused at the door. "And one more thing. Don't let anyone make you feel small. Not Leo, not the world, and definitely not yourself." With that, he was gone, leaving Ella alone with the weight of her decision. Her heart pounded as she stared at the folder, her mind warring between hope and doubt. This could change everything. But at what cost? The night had started with humiliation, but now it offered the glimmer of something more, something extraordinary. Ella stared at the folder long after Archer left, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. The chatter of the party had faded into the distance, muffled behind the heavy doors of the lounge. Her fingers brushed against the smooth paper, and she couldn't help but wonder if this was some elaborate joke, a test of character designed to see how desperate she really was. But Archer's words echoed in her mind. Don't let anyone make you feel small. Not Leo, not the world, and definitely not yourself. She closed the folder, clutching it tightly as she stood. She didn't know if she was stepping into a trap or onto a lifeline, but there was one thing she was sure of. She wasn't going to stay in the shadows any longer. When she opened the door and stepped back into the party, the atmosphere hit her like a wave. The music was louder, the laughter forced, and the guests were doing everything they could to erase the uncomfortable memory of what had just happened. But Ella could still feel their stares. She moved with purpose, her wet shoes squelching against the marble floors, as she made her way toward the service area. She needed to finish this job, to leave with her head high. But as she passed by the pool again, her gaze caught something, or someone. Leo. He was arguing with one of the security guards near the gate, his face red with frustration. His arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by desperation as he tried to push his way back into the party. I'm a guest, Leo barked, his voice sharp and whiny. Do you even know who I am? Ella froze, watching the scene unfold. It was almost poetic, seeing him squirm like this. For a moment, she considered walking past, leaving him to his own devices. But then, an idea crept into her mind, one that made her pulse quicken. She approached the scene, her head held high, and before the guards could stop her, she said, "Wait." The guards turned, startled by her sudden interjection. Leo did too, his expression twisting from confusion to fury when he saw her. "What are you doing here?" he sneered. "Shouldn't you be mopping floors or something?" Ella ignored him and addressed the guards instead. "This man assaulted me earlier. He pushed me into the pool while I was working. I think Mr. Malcolm would want to know if you're letting him back in." Leo's face drained of color. "What? That's ridiculous. She's lying." The guards exchanged glances, clearly uncertain. "You can check with Mr. Malcolm yourself," Ella added, her voice calm and measured. "Or you can let him back in and explain why later." The guards nodded and grabbed Leo's arms. "Sorry, sir. You're not welcome here tonight." "Wait." Leo struggled, his voice cracking with indignation. "You can't just..." But his protests were cut short as the guards escorted him out the gate. Ella watched as he disappeared into the night, his shouts fading into the distance. For the first time in what felt like forever, Ella allowed herself a small, triumphant smile. But her moment of satisfaction didn't last long. She felt a hand on her shoulder and turned to see one of the other servers, Daniel, a friend who had been working alongside her for years. "Ella," he said, his voice low, "what just happened back there?" "Just making sure the trash is taken out," she replied, her tone light but firm. Daniel didn't laugh. Instead, he glanced at the folder she was still holding. "What's that?" Ella hesitated. She hadn't told anyone about Archer's offer yet, partly because she didn't know how to explain it. "Just something I need to think about," she said finally. "Be careful," Daniel warned. "People like him don't give handouts without expecting something in return." His words struck a chord of doubt in her heart, but Ella pushed it aside. Archer Malcolm wasn't like Leo, or so she hoped. "I'll be fine," she said, though the weight of her own uncertainty lingered. As the night wore on, Ella finished her shift in silence, her mind replaying the events over and over again. By the time she walked out of the mansion, the city skyline glowing in the distance, she felt like she'd lived a lifetime in just a few hours. When she reached the bus stop, she pulled out the folder again, flipping through the pages. The offer was real. The terms were clear. And yet, a small voice in her head whispered, "Is it too good to be true?" The bus arrived, and Ella climbed aboard, her wet uniform earning her a few curious glances. She didn't care. As she sat down, her phone buzzed. It was a text from her brother, Max. "Mom's doing better today. Thanks for everything, love you." Her chest tightened. This was why she worked so hard, why she endured people like Leo. But maybe Archer was right. Maybe there was another way. As the bus rolled through the city streets, Ella stared out the window, clutching the folder tightly. Whatever choice she made, she knew one thing for certain. She was done being invisible. She wasn't just going to survive. She was going to rise. As Ella stepped off the bus and walked the quiet streets toward her small apartment, the weight of the decision she had to make grew heavier. The folder seemed to pulse in her hands, a physical reminder of the crossroads she stood at. She'd spent years sacrificing for her family, fighting to keep them afloat, and now, for the first time, there was an offer to make things easier. But was it real? Could she trust someone as powerful as Archer Malcolm? She unlocked the apartment door and slipped inside quietly, not wanting to wake her mother or her younger brother, Max. The apartment was modest, the furniture worn but clean, every corner speaking of a family that made do with what they had. Ella peeked into her mother's room. Her mother was asleep, her breathing steady for once, a sign that the new medication might be working. A wave of relief washed over Ella, but it was quickly followed by the familiar ache of worry. How long would it last? How many more bills would pile up? She turned to Max's room, finding him hunched over a desk, textbooks spread out in front of him. His head jerked up as she walked in. "You're home late," he said, rubbing his eyes. "Yeah, the party ran long," Ella replied, setting the folder down on the table. "What's that?" Max asked, eyeing the papers curiously. Ella hesitated. "It's an opportunity. Something that could change things for us." Max leaned forward, scanning the documents. His eyes widened as he read the details. "Ella, this is amazing. Are you seriously considering it?" "I don't know," she admitted, sinking into a chair. "What if it's not what it seems? What if I take this chance and it's just another way for someone to use me?" Max's expression softened. "Elle, you've spent your whole life doing everything for us. Maybe it's time you took a chance for yourself. If this can help you, help all of us, then why not? What's the worst that could happen?" Ella smiled faintly, reaching out to ruffle his hair. "You're supposed to be the little brother. Stop being so wise." Max grinned, but his eyes were serious. "You've earned this, Ella. Don't let fear stop you." As the night stretched on, Ella sat at the kitchen table, the folder open in front of her. She weighed every detail, every potential risk and reward. By the time the first rays of sunlight crept through the window, her decision was made. 2 days later, Ella stood outside the towering glass building that housed one of Archer Malcolm's many foundations. The air was crisp, and her nerves were electric, but she reminded herself why she was here. This wasn't just about her. This was about her family, about proving to herself that she was capable of more. Inside, the receptionist greeted her warmly and led her to a conference room. The walls were lined with photos of community projects, schools being built, hospitals receiving funding, smiling faces of people whose lives had been changed. Archer walked in moments later, his presence as commanding as ever. He smiled when he saw her. "I wasn't sure you'd come." Ella stood, meeting his gaze with confidence. "I wasn't sure either, but I'm here." Archer nodded, gesturing for her to sit. "Good. Let's get started." For the next few hours, they discussed her role. It was more than she'd imagined. Coordinating projects, working with communities, and learning the inner workings of philanthropy. It was challenging, but it was also an opportunity to make a real impact. As the meeting ended, Archer handed her a keycard. "Welcome to the team, Ella. I have a feeling you'll do great things here." Ella took the card, her heart pounding. This was it. A new chapter, a chance to rewrite her story. Months passed, and Ella threw herself into her work. She learned quickly, earning the respect of her colleagues and even Archer himself. The projects she coordinated brought real change to struggling communities, and for the first time in years, she felt like she was truly making a difference. At home, things improved too. Her mother's health stabilized with better treatment, and Max excelled in school. no longer burdened by the fear of financial instability. But Ella's biggest transformation was internal. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. One evening, after a long day at the foundation, Ella stood on the balcony of her apartment, looking out over the city. The lights stretched endlessly, a reminder of how far she'd come. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Archer. Excellent work on the Rivercrest project. Keep leading with that fire of yours. Ella smiled, putting the phone down. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel proud, not just for what she'd done, but for who she'd become. She had risen above the humiliation, the struggle, and the doubt. And she wasn't done yet. Can you even call this a bag? Ruby's voice dripped with disdain as she held up Alina's faded backpack, shaking it like it might fall apart in her hands. Looks more like something you'd find at a lost and found sale. Claire laughed from her perch on the window ledge, her perfectly manicured nails tapping rhythmically on her phone screen. Forget the bag. Have you seen her shoes? I didn't know thrift stores even sold things that outdated. Alina sat quietly on her bunk, her textbook open but unread. She felt their stares like daggers, each word a calculated jab meant to humiliate. It was always the same snide remarks about her clothes, her things, or the fact that she didn't fit their idea of belonging. Hey! Earth to Alina, Ruby called, tossing the backpack onto the floor. Did you hear what I said? Or do I need to speak slower? Alina looked up, her expression calm despite the fire burning in her chest. She had mastered the art of keeping her cool, letting their words roll off like water on glass. But inside, every insult fueled a growing resolve. They thought they had her figured out, a quiet, penniless girl who was too meek to fight back. What they didn't know was that she was the daughter of one of the most powerful billionaires in the country. She had chosen this life to escape the suffocating expectations of her family, to prove she could stand on her own. But Ruby and Claire were about to find out just how wrong they were. Ruby smirked, leaning against her desk. What's wrong, Alina? Cat got your tongue? She tossed her sleek hair over her shoulder, exuding confidence. Oh wait, I forgot. You probably can't afford one of those either. Claire cackled from the window. Classic Ruby. She always knows how to sum it up, doesn't she? Alina's grip tightened on her pen. She took a slow breath, steadying herself. Reacting now would only give them satisfaction. She had endured their mockery for months, but their latest antics were pushing her patience to its limits. She glanced at the clock on the wall. The day wasn't far off when they would learn the truth, and that thought kept her steady. She gathered her things and stood, forcing herself to remain calm. If you're done, I've got a study group to get to, she said evenly, her voice soft but steady. Ruby scoffed. Study group? Oh please, is that what you call sitting alone in the library with your nose in a book? Claire leaned closer, fake curiosity lighting up her face. Wait, maybe she's actually part of one of those nerdy clubs where they talk about calculus for fun. Sounds like her style, doesn't it? Their laughter echoed in the room as Alina walked out. She didn't let them see the way her jaw clenched or how her hands shook ever so slightly. She needed to be patient, just a little longer. By the time Alina reached the campus library, her mask of composure had cracked. She slumped into a chair in a quiet corner, pulling out her phone. There it was, a text from her father. Dad, the event is confirmed. Do you want me to arrange transport? Or will you be taking your car from the city? Her car. It was one of a fleet, a custom-designed sports vehicle she had deliberately left in the city to keep her identity hidden. No one here knew who she really was. To Ruby and Claire, she was just a poor scholarship student. To the world outside, she was Alina Knight, the heiress to the Knight fortune and one of the wealthiest families in the country. She tapped out a response. Me, no need. I'll manage. Just let me know the time. Alina stared at the screen. The event would be her father's annual gala, an extravagant affair attended by celebrities, politicians, and business moguls. For months, she had avoided these obligations, carving out her own life away from the suffocating wealth and power her family wielded. But now, she wasn't so sure she wanted to keep her identity a secret. If Ruby and Claire thought they could treat her like dirt, they were in for the shock of their lives. A few days later, Ruby and Claire sat in their usual corner of the cafeteria, gossiping loudly about their weekend plans. "Oh, I just have to show you the new shoes I got," Ruby said, pulling out her phone. "Limited edition. Like, they only made 50 pairs. Ugh, you're so lucky," Claire sighed. Meanwhile, I'm stuck with last month's fashion. The horror. Alina walked by with her tray of food, keeping her head down. She wasn't in the mood for another confrontation, but Ruby spotted her anyway. "Hey, Alina, why don't you join us?" Ruby called, her voice saccharine sweet. Alina froze. She knew better than to take the bait, but something about Ruby's smug smile made her pause. She walked over to their table and stood still, her expression unreadable. "What is it now?" she asked softly. Ruby leaned back in her chair. "Nothing, really. Just wondering if you've ever thought about, upgrading your wardrobe. You're embarrassing all of us." "Honestly," Claire giggled. "I mean, we're doing you a favor by telling you this. Who else would?" Alina didn't respond. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. With a few taps, she opened an article on the upcoming Night Foundation Gala and slid it across the table. Ruby glanced at the headline, her brow furrowing. Knight family to host annual gala. A night of philanthropy and prestige. "What is this?" Ruby asked, confused. Alina tilted her head slightly, her voice calm but laced with steel. "You should read the guest list." Claire peered over Ruby's shoulder, her eyes widening as realization dawned. There it was. In bold print, Alina Knight, daughter of billionaire philanthropist William Knight, confirmed as a special guest. Ruby's face drained of color. "You're kidding." "Wish I was," Alina said with a small smile. "But don't worry, you won't have to see me in these thrift store clothes much longer. I'll be debuting something a little more appropriate." She picked up her tray and walked away, leaving Ruby and Claire gaping in stunned silence. The next few days on campus were eerily quiet around Ruby and Claire. Alina continued to keep to herself, but she could feel the tension brewing. It was clear they had been shaken by what they'd read. Yet, she knew their bruised egos wouldn't let them back down so easily. Sure enough, Ruby struck first. It was during a lecture. The professor was wrapping up his talk when Ruby raised her hand. "Professor, I was just wondering," she began, her tone dripping with fake curiosity. "Do you think it's fair for some students to, buy their way into programs?" Asking for a friend, of course. A ripple of laughter spread through the classroom. Alina didn't flinch, even as several students turned to glance at her. The professor frowned. "Our university prides itself on its merit-based admissions. Ruby. I'd hope that all students here earn their place through hard work and talent." Ruby's smirk faltered slightly, but she wasn't done. "Oh, absolutely. But sometimes connections help, don't they? Like when your last name opens doors that others don't get to walk through." Alina met Ruby's gaze across the room. There was no anger, no reaction. Just a calm, steady look that made Ruby shift uncomfortably in her seat. Later that evening, Alina sat on a bench in the campus gardens, scrolling through her phone. She had made a decision. Her patience was wearing thin, and it was time to remind Ruby and Claire that wealth wasn't just about money. It was about power, influence, and knowing how to wield both. Her father's assistant had sent her a message earlier. "The gala arrangements are complete. Would you like me to extend an invitation to your classmates?" Alina smiled. Oh yes, she thought. This is going to be fun. The next morning, Ruby and Claire found glossy envelopes slipped under their dorm room door. Ruby tore hers open, her eyes narrowing as she read. "The Knight Foundation requests the honor of your presence at its annual philanthropy gala. Dress code: black tie." Ruby's face lit up with glee. "Claire, look at this. We're invited to the Knight Gala." Claire gasped, snatching the invitation from Ruby's hands. "No way. Do you know how exclusive this event is? This is like the party of the year." Ruby's excitement dimmed slightly as she glanced at the envelope again. "Wait. Why would we get invited?" Claire shrugged. "Who cares? Maybe they're broadening their guest list this year. Besides, This is our chance to network. Imagine who we could meet. Neither of them realized the trap they were walking into. The night of the gala was nothing short of spectacular. The venue, a sprawling estate surrounded by manicured gardens and glittering fountains, buzzed with energy as luxury cars pulled up one by one. Ruby and Claire arrived together, dressed in their finest gowns, practically vibrating with excitement. "This place is insane," Claire whispered as they stepped inside, their heels clicking on the marble floors. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above them, and the room was filled with well-dressed elites, sipping champagne and exchanging polite conversation. Ruby glanced around, her sharp eyes scanning for anyone famous. "Let's find someone worth talking to," she said, dragging Claire toward the main hall. As they passed a group of attendees, they froze. There, standing at the center of a circle of admirers, was Alina. But she wasn't the Alina they knew. Dressed in an elegant, custom-made gown, her hair styled perfectly, and adorned with jewels that glittered like the night sky, Alina looked every inch the billionaire heiress. She smiled warmly at the people surrounding her, exuding confidence and grace. Ruby's jaw dropped. "That can't be her." Claire tugged at Ruby's arm. "It is her." "What the—" Before they could retreat, Alina spotted them. Her smile widened, but there was an unmistakable glint in her eyes. She excused herself from the group and approached them, her steps deliberate and measured. "Ruby, Claire," Alina greeted them, her voice calm but carrying an unmistakable authority. "I'm so glad you could make it." Ruby scrambled for words. You're the host," Alina finished for her, tilting her head slightly. "Didn't I mention that before?" As the evening progressed, Alina made sure Ruby and Claire were seated at a table near the center of the hall, where everyone could see them. When it was time for speeches, Alina stepped onto the stage. The room fell silent as she addressed the crowd. "Good evening, everyone," she began. "Thank you all for joining us tonight. The Knight Foundation has always been about lifting people up, creating opportunities, and fostering kindness." Her gaze swept the room, landing briefly on Ruby and Claire. "But unfortunately, not everyone understands the importance of kindness," she continued, her voice steady but carrying an edge. "Some people think it's acceptable to look down on others, to judge them based on appearances or circumstances." A ripple of murmurs spread through the audience as Alina's words sank in. Ruby and Claire shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their faces burning with embarrassment. Alina smiled. "Thankfully, events like these remind us that true worth isn't about what you wear or where you come from. It's about character." The applause that followed was thunderous, but Ruby and Claire sat frozen, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Ruby and Claire spent the rest of the gala in stunned silence, sipping their champagne as Alina moved gracefully through the crowd, greeted by dignitaries, business magnates, and celebrities. For the first time in their lives, they weren't the center of attention. Claire leaned closer to Ruby, her voice a harsh whisper. "What are we going to do? She's like royalty here." Ruby clenched her jaw, her pride wounded. "I don't know, but this doesn't make sense. She's been living like a pauper in that dorm room all this time. Why would someone like her hide this?" "I don't know," Claire replied nervously, her eyes darting around the room. "But if she tells people how we've treated her—" Ruby's stomach churned. For the first time, she realized that their actions had consequences, especially now that they knew who Alina really was. The next morning, Ruby and Claire dragged themselves back to their dorm room, still reeling from the events of the night. They hadn't dared to approach Alina again at the gala, choosing instead to slink into the background. But the damage was already done. As they entered the room, they found a note on Ruby's bed, written in Alina's elegant handwriting. "Good morning, ladies. I hope you enjoyed last night. Just a reminder, kindness matters. You'll hear from me soon. Alina." Ruby crumpled the note in her fist, her face red with anger. "She's messing with us. She's not going to do anything." Claire wasn't so sure. "You didn't see the way people were hanging on her every word. She could ruin us if she wanted to. What if she tells the school administration? Or worse, her father?" The following week on campus was a nightmare for Ruby and Claire. The story of Alina's true identity spread like wildfire after the gala. By Monday morning, everyone knew that the quiet girl in the dorm room was none other than Alina Knight, the billionaire heiress. Students who had previously ignored her now went out of their way to greet her, offering compliments or asking for favors. Professors treated her with newfound respect, and even the dean stopped by one of her lectures to personally commend her philanthropic work. For Ruby and Claire, it was as though the tables had turned overnight. "Hey, Alina," one of their classmates called out in the cafeteria. "Are you free this weekend? My dad owns a yacht. We could host a party in your honor." Ruby clenched her fork so tightly her knuckles turned white. "This is ridiculous," she muttered under her breath. Claire poked at her salad, her appetite gone. "It's not fair," she whispered. "She didn't do anything to deserve this." Ruby scoffed. "She's just lucky. That's all this is, luck." But deep down, even Ruby knew it wasn't luck. Alina's composure, her intelligence, and her quiet strength had always set her apart. The only difference now was that everyone else could see it too. One evening, Alina returned to the dorm to find Ruby and Claire sitting on her bed, waiting for her. Ruby stood as Alina entered, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Alina," Ruby began, her tone unnaturally sweet, "we just wanted to say we're sorry for, everything." Alina raised an eyebrow, setting her bag down. "Sorry," she repeated, her voice calm but skeptical. Claire nodded eagerly. "Yeah, we didn't mean any of it. We were just joking around, We didn't realize that I was rich." Alina finished for her, crossing her arms. Ruby and Claire exchanged nervous glances. "It wasn't about that," Ruby said quickly. We got off on the wrong foot. But we want to make it right." Alina regarded them for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "You want to make it right?" she repeated slowly. "Yes," Claire said, her voice almost pleading. "We'll do whatever it takes. Just, please don't ruin us." Alina tilted her head slightly, as if considering their words. "Ruin you?" she echoed. "What makes you think I'd do that?" Ruby hesitated. "Well, you could, with your connections and everything. But we're genuinely sorry. Right, Claire?" "Totally," Claire agreed, nodding vigorously. Alina sighed softly and walked over to her bed. "For months, I let you humiliate me because I thought it wasn't worth fighting back. I thought if I stayed quiet, you'd eventually get bored and leave me alone." Ruby and Claire shifted uncomfortably, avoiding her gaze. "But now," Alina continued, her voice steady, "I realize that letting people walk all over you only makes them think they can get away with it." She leaned forward slightly, her eyes piercing. "You two don't get to decide how this ends. I do." The following week, Ruby and Claire received letters from the dean's office. They were summoned for a disciplinary hearing regarding their treatment of a fellow student. Alina hadn't needed to say much. Her reputation alone was enough to prompt the administration to act. By the end of the hearing, both girls were placed on probation, their spotless records tarnished. They were also required to attend sensitivity training and issue a formal apology to Alina in front of the student council. But Alina wasn't finished. Through her family's foundation, she anonymously funded a new scholarship program for underprivileged students. The first recipients were announced at a campus-wide event, with Alina delivering the keynote speech. Ruby and Claire were forced to watch as Alina celebrated the very values they had mocked. Months later, Alina sat in the dorm room she no longer needed to share. Ruby and Claire had moved out after the fallout, unable to face the constant judgment from their peers. As Alina packed her things, preparing to move into an off-campus apartment, she reflected on how much had changed. She had learned to stand up for herself, to embrace her strength without losing her kindness. And as for Ruby and Claire, they had learned a lesson they would never forget. True power wasn't about wealth or status, it was about character.